Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show. On this podcast, you'll learn from professional players, coaches, and executives from all over the world and see the court in a brand new way. And now, joining you courtside, your Gen Z host, John Hartofilis.
Hi, Michael. What's going on?
Not too much. How are you? Thanks for having me on the Gen Z podcast. I'm looking forward to chatting.
Thanks so much for joining. You've obviously, we've spoken so much before the show. Obviously, having met each other 2 years ago back at the Xavier camp, but really, like leading up to this show, we've just, like even before the show, the pre-call for this pod, before getting the show was maybe the longest I've ever had, just because obviously we have so much to talk about. So I'm really excited for this show. I know there's going to be a lot of cool stuff, and you have a really cool story. So I'm really excited to get right into it. But maybe starting us off, I mean, obviously you had a great playing career, but I'm curious, maybe, the passion for basketball, did it start maybe as a kid? Did you really fall in love when you got to college? Like, where did that really take off for you?
We talked about, I grew up originally in Whitestone, in Queens, and we lived in one of the row houses on 6th Avenue. It's the first address you ever memorized in your life as a child, 14780 6th Avenue in Whitestone. And the family next door, the Messengers, right? So their driveway was literally connected to our front lawn. And I don't know if I was 5 or 6, and one day I just kind of went out into the front lawn, and David Messenger, he was older than me. I think he was 5 years older. But anyway, I walked out there, and one day there was a basketball in his driveway. There was nobody else around. The family wasn't there. So I picked it up, and at the back of his driveway, he had a little basket. So I kind of just traipsed back there and looked up there and started throwing the ball. So I must have been probably at least 6. I was able to get it up to the, to the 10-foot rim height. So I couldn't have been super young, but to this day, man, it's hard to, you mentioned falling in love. And it's like, how do you describe that feeling when you discover a thing? But I can remember that feeling of just even having that ball and just looking up at that rim and throwing it up there. And this sensation that came over me, like, wow, this is the greatest thing I've ever had happen in my 6 years on the planet. So, I mean, I feel like that's the answer. Although I didn't really, in Whitestone, we left when I was going into the 4th grade. So all of my memories about CYO and intramural and kind of playing team basketball was really in Ridgewood, New Jersey, and Bergen County. But I remember the love was there, was right away. So it's a long-winded answer. But the Messenger driveway in Whitestone, Queens is where it all started.
I love that. And like you said, I mean, it might, there's long-winded answers, but I ask a lot of long-winded questions, but it's all, I mean, that's because we're passionate what we're talking about. I mean, you have a love for the game, and I love the question. I love answers like that because it really just articulates, well, I mean, your entire career maybe started, it's kind of funny, in your neighbor's driveway just because they weren't there and you got a chance to run over there. Who knows what happens if it takes you a little bit longer to fall in love with the game. So you obviously
That's the randomness of life. I was saying that to my wife a couple of days ago, right? You take a right at the end of the street and you meet this person, or you don't, or this thing happens. And right, if that ball isn't there, I mean, right, if you never know, but it's always strikes me as, man, just these little things that make sometimes all of the difference in your life. But so I'm happy to be long-winded, man. I know you got the same love for this round ball, and it's dictated and continues to dictate our lives. You're a young man at your age, and I'm a bit older, and still, in large respects, it leads us where we're going. So that's a good thing.
Nothing I love more than that orange ball. Just everything about it is perfect. But I mean, maybe getting into, though, you're right. Once you actually started playing, you're right, that passion turned into, okay, now developing a work ethic, like getting much better. We could talk maybe a little bit about your high school career, but I mean, how did that, once you started really getting better and you started seeing it more as something that you did, the competitive nature came out and playing at the next level came out. How did that kind of maybe set up you playing at Wesleyan and getting to the next level in college?
The passion, right, was there, and in Ridgewood's a really nice town to grow up in. And I was kind of the typical 3-sport guy, so I was playing baseball, basketball, and football. And I was decent in baseball too. I had kind of good hand-eye and played a lot with that into high school as well. Football, I stopped when I got to high school, but and you all, your friends played in season, so of course you were always playing. But the basketball was the thing that I was playing every day, even when it was baseball or football season. And it's funny. So Bergen Catholic was, back in the early '80s, BC was like the school that you wanted to go to for football also, but as a basketball player, BC was the place. And so even when you were in the 6th or 7th grade, my dad was taking me to Bergen Catholic High School varsity basketball games, right? And you're a 7th grader and you're fantasizing about, oh man, one day I'm going to be wearing that red, gold, and white uniform. And so my dad's a super hard worker. My mom is too. My mom is from Italy. My dad went to medical school in Italy, met her, dragged her back to Queens. So, she must have really loved him. But I liked working, I liked practicing. And so I kind of got it in my head by the age of 12, 13. Okay, man, I'm going to play at Bergen Catholic and I'm going to play in the NBA and all these things. And so I worked a lot at it in basketball camps, 5-star and Poconos and all the Holy Cross and all the, I was going to basketball camp like everybody, a couple, 3-4 weeks out of the summer and working on my game and just playing a lot. I think I spent, back in the day, it may be a little different now with, we didn't have AAU. AAU was just kind of starting when I was finishing up high school. But back in the day, you were at the park playing, going up and down and just so, which is good because when you're just playing games, sometimes, right, and that's good too, but now you're relying only on, okay, well, these are the things that I do well. I'm a shooter, I'm going to shoot it. But when you're in the park trying to survive because if you don't get next, you got to leave the park because 20 other guys are waiting. You really, survival of the fittest. And so I felt it actually helped develop your game better to some degree. But then, the work ethic was there and it was an everyday thing. Shoot 100 foul shots before practice, 100 foul shots after, playing, and then got to Bergen Catholic. And I remember the longest night of my life was probably, I don't remember the date in November, but it would have been 1978, the night before the list came out for the Bergen Catholic freshman team. Because you kind of understood, okay, if you make the freshman team, you're kind of legit and you've got a chance to have a career there. If you don't make the freshman team, and 300 guys tried out for the BC freshman team. I remember being in my little bedroom and my little red carpet floor, just staring up at the ceiling all night, like, oh man, what's Brother Byer? What did he decide? And woke up the next day, got to the first floor of Bergen Catholic, and there was my name on that list, thankfully. And that kind of, the road started there, and we had good teams. We were ranked, I think, 3rd in the state my senior year, lost in the semis of the state championship. Anyway, my teammates all played college basketball. A couple guys, Division I, a couple of us smaller, Division III. One guy played baseball at Army too. So and excellent coaching, Chris Donfield. And so it was a great opportunity to play competitive basketball, to be taught the game well. And then that put me in a position. I was recruited some by Ivy League schools, a couple of Division II schools. And I got into Holy Cross and Boston College. This is back when the Big East was just kind of starting to blow up back in the late 70s, early 80s. And of course, you always have that dream like, oh, I want to play Division I. And I thought about it for a minute. I had maybe a too healthy self-confidence that I could play the game a little. But ultimately, I think my mom and dad prevailed, and hopefully common sense prevailed. And Wesleyan was a school that had recruited me, and it is an excellent school. And I knew I could go and play 4 years, most likely, get a great education, and have a life-altering experience in the classroom and outside of it, which is ultimately precisely what happened. So no regrets, had a nice little career at Wesleyan, played a tiny bit after college, which we don't need to talk about, but it was basketball. Yeah. So the playing career was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and played with some excellent players, and just like all players talk about, the camaraderie of going. That's your fraternity, right? You go through at high school too. I was playing with the same guys for 4 years, college, and these are bonds that you build that to this day last and are enjoyable. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's a little bit of my own playing career.
You definitely did, and kind of articulating just exactly what went into that whole progression. And the first thing that jumped out to me was that the 300 kids tried out for your freshman team. 100 guys tried at Xavier, and I always feel like that's an absurd number, but 300 is just so competitive. And I mean, when you're 14 years old, I mean that really is maybe the most adversity you've ever been through, and it's something that really sticks out to everyone. So it's crazy that you're talking about this all these years later, about that moment sitting in your room looking up at the ceiling, because it meant so much to you at the time, and it probably still means so much to you now.
Again, we talk about those random moments or those forks in the road. I mean, what happens if my name's not on that list? And I think I tried out I didn't play my freshman year, I played my junior year baseball anyway. But right, what happens? Would I have decided to, well, do I give up, or do I keep at it, come back even better? You never know. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'm 56 years old. I can look back on my life and I can pinpoint certain, as everybody can, you can pinpoint certain moments. And I literally remember the carpeting in I had my own room. My brothers they shared a room. I can remember looking up at that wall and just like my world was going to either fall apart or become enhanced. So so those are I like to say, you're alive and your heart's beating hard, right? So that is a good feeling.
That's true. I even have the original list from my senior year up here in the jersey. It's obviously something that means a lot to me, and I have it just stored in there because making the team as a senior meant a lot to me. And it's funny, right? So many people, right? The two of us having those experiences, everyone else has maybe similar things, and it means the world to us. Maybe thinking about past your high school career, obviously playing at such a prestigious school that obviously taught you a lot and prepared you for the next level. But I'm curious maybe what the adjustment was like once you got to college and how different it was, and if there were any maybe bumps in the road that led you to become a better player, but maybe even a better person.
And before I answer, I just want to give you a little props, man, because I happened to make my team the freshman year and got to play for 4 years. But you told us off camera told me that you didn't make the team until your senior year, and that's if you look up persistence, right, in the dictionary, your photo should be there. But that's a great story, and that's not only about getting a uniform and playing on team 1 year, but just it speaks to obviously who you are as a person, right? To have that determination. And so that's a great lesson, and I'm sure it'll take you far. But having grit. People talk about this a lot. It's on TED Talks, and having grit and persistence to go out and get the things that you want in life. I don't know if there's a more important lesson that can be imparted, or if somebody asks me, hey, what have you learned? Kind of that's the answer is, if you really, it's cliche and it's obvious, but if you really, like you wanted to get that uniform, and it sits proudly behind you, framed, in that nice powder blue, number 21, right? It's only there because you had the determination to get it. 99 out of 900 out of 1,000 people just wouldn't have done what you did. So, but I digress. So, in terms of Wesleyan, 2,600 students. It was like Bergen Catholic it was an all boys. It was de facto all white, except there was actually one student of color, Tony Clary, who was a friend of mine. But I came from kind of an upper middle class Bergen Catholic, and it was a Catholic school too, and that's certainly and still is important to me. And I had a great experience there. But then to get to Wesleyan, diversity was the buzzword for Wesleyan back in 1982 when I was researching it, and they weren't kidding, and it was a beautiful thing. And they had a very vibrant African American community, Asian, Indian, you name it. So my classmates, right, were not the same classmates I had at BC, and that's kind of a perfect metaphor for life. That's why I love New York City so much, right? New York City is the perfect place because the whole world has kind of come together and it's there. But having that diversity and just different people who thought differently, cared about different things, whether it was art or music or theater or hoops or business or whatever it was. But everybody there was on point and legit and smart and challenged you and made you a better student and thinker and communicator if you were there to embrace all those, which I think 99% of people who go to Wesleyan are there to embrace that. That's what it is. So you wouldn't go there if you wanted to be in your little silo and not be challenged. So it was a great place to discover other people, but also in other concepts, beliefs, but also myself. And how do you respond to that? And then do you embrace it? And I think I did. And so it made me a better person. Liberal arts kind of education. It was exactly what I wanted to have. And then the friendships and the relationships that you built were great and long lasting. And I was on the phone with one of those guys literally just yesterday. And in terms of the basketball piece of it, I think I said this on a previous podcast that you may have listened to, but I could play offense a little bit, right? I could shoot, I could handle, and I could pass. And I always just felt like I could score more points than you. It kind of, that's how I play. Although at Bergen Catholic, we played defense too. But I relied more on what I could do at that one end of the floor. And my coach, Herb Kenny at Wesleyan, was a old school accountability is a great thing. Don't get me wrong. I believe in it 110%, but you had to play defense. And so he rode me, and he rode me hard, because you just don't turn it on because your coach says, hey, I want you to pay as much attention, give as much effort on that side of the 94 by 50 as the other side. And so it took me some getting yelled at and benchings and not playing as much. But it certainly made me buy into that end and buy into becoming a more well-rounded player. One other freshman along with me, we played varsity beginning our freshman year. And so by the time we were juniors and seniors, we were captains our senior year, but we're kind of captains, if you will, for a good part of the time, which is a great honor, but it also, right, responsibility comes with that. So being a great teammate, right? It's hard to be a great teammate if you're only giving 100% at the offensive end. Up and you come back on D, you're kind of letting your guy get into the paint, right? And all of a sudden you're getting squared. So it's hard for me to hold my teammates accountable if I'm not giving the same effort and same accountability. So that was a nice piece in that I really had to think about, okay, it's more than just putting the ball in the basket and making a pretty pass or whatever and getting a W, which was the thing I always wanted. But you've also got to lead. You've got to lead by example too. You've got to take that charge. You've got to get red-faced and just show that you're giving the effort. So I'm being long-winded again, but in terms of a little bit of an evolution of my game, certainly I was a better defender when I left. In my last couple of years than when I got there. I was more focused on, you always are, right? Teams and players are always, you're always comfortable. This is what I'm comfortable doing, right? Nobody ever wants to be uncomfortable. So that's why you pick up the ball handler 94 feet, right? You want to be uncomfortable. So Coach Kenny wanted me to be uncomfortable in the place to be. So I would say some maturation happened in my game and division. I didn't know what to expect. I think when I went to West and when I didn't go to Division I didn't exactly know how talented the competition would be. But there were a lot of guys who could play in Division III, especially, at least back then, it was a bit more guard-oriented. So there were a lot of good guards in Division who certainly could have played Division II and Division I ball, but for whatever reason ended up where they did. So the competition level was high too. So I was just super disappointed because we made the big postseason tournament my junior year. We hadn't made it for a number of years. And then my senior year, we missed out on it by losing our last game. And that was kind of devastating because I wanted to be able to leave having made that tournament. Yeah, but anyway, but I had a good little career there at Wesleyan in Middletown. And my dad came to every single one of my games, home games, I think my senior year, and probably 95% of all of them in 4 years. But and that was a special thing to share too. That when I look up in the stands and there was Pops, sitting there, coming from work, hustling to make the game, and he'd have his post-game critiques about, hey, you should have, you missed that foul shot. Hey, you missed that pass, and could have given him more. Anyway, so that was, to be able to share that with him was special too.
Obviously, that time in college was a huge part of your development, both as a leader and obviously we've been talking about your role as a player this whole time. I mean, like you mentioned with your having your father at the games and him supporting you. I mean, what was it like? I mean, how important is it maybe to have that maybe figure that's supporting you and really believing in you, and maybe sometimes picking you up when you're down when things go wrong?
That's a great question, and I don't know that anybody's ever asked it before. So I want to my compliments, because the question that I've had asked often, people kind of waste the time or take the time to look and see where I've been or what I've done. In that I was scouting with the Nets. I was in the NBA and I left for what I thought was going to be a short period of time. It ended up being a long time. I went to law school in the midst of it. And then it took a long time to get back into the league. And that story people like a lot and want to talk about, hey, well, how did you do that? Or how did you, and right, the answer is what we talked about before. It's just, okay, you have to have self-confidence and believe you can do it, right? But then it's just having some grit or being able to persist and get through, the hard times that typically will knock people off the path. And where does that come from? Ultimately, you don't just buy it at the store when you're 20 or 30. And you touched on it with your question. The answer is, I had two parents, and I'm the oldest of six, so big loving family. But I had two parents who just loved me unconditionally, they didn't spoil me at all, but gave me everything I needed, supported me in everything. And so to me, if you ask the question, well, how are you able to maintain that persistence in the face of that team saying no, that team saying no, 18 teams saying no? And I think the answer is that confidence comes from them. It comes from my parents, who taught me all the right things, gave me that love, that security, that belief in this notion that, you know what, if you're a good person, if you work hard and you stay at it, you can create your luck and you can get to where you want to get to. So I appreciate the question, man, because I've never even thought of, you gave a different hybrid on the question, but that's because if people don't have that kind of like persistence like you did, right? Hey, man, I'm coming back next year, coach, and trying out again. Come back next year, coach. You're coming back again, John, for your season? Yes, I am. And this time I'm going to make it. There's an answer for where did that come from? Now, it's inherent in you and your DNA, but it's probably, I bet I could trace it back to your parents and to your family and to the environment that you were raised in that made you feel like, well, I believe this. I believe that if I keep trying, I can get there. So I appreciate the question, man. It's a good one. I remember that question.
It was a great answer too, and it really just shows. I mean, it really just encapsulates just everything that goes into both your career, but also just like the groundwork that was laid for you. I mean, I did think you were going to bring up maybe the story about how your dad also maybe saved you from getting to your first ever basketball tournament while you were at Wesleyan. So I mean, there's the things that you really can't see, like the support at the stand, like maybe the stuff that was like little by little building out. There's also maybe the big monster ones where he really just came to the rescue. But I do have to give you credit though. You were early for this show, so you have learned from your lesson.
Good one. And for the listeners at home who don't know what you're referring to, do you want me to? I'll try to give a super short version. But it was, I mentioned earlier that one of my best friends, his name is Chris Brown. He's still one of my best friends. He lives he's in Southport now. He's from the Bronx, Grand Concourse, and he and I entered West at the same time, and we were the first two freshmen to play varsity. And so preseason comes and goes. It's our first game. We're going up to Hamilton College, and we've got to be at the gymnasium by, I think it was 7:30. And so punctuality is my thing, man. It's my pet peeve. But I don't even think it's a pet peeve. I just think you should be on time, right? It's a question of consideration for other human beings. And so, of course, just like I get to the airport 3 hours early, and it drives my wife crazy. I set my alarm that morning, and I'm up at 4:30, and I shower, and I'm dressed in my red Wesleyan leather bag with Wesleyan and black letters, and it's 5:30 in the morning, and it's November, it's freezing outside, it's dark, and there's no place for me to go, right? Because the gym is not open yet. I'm 2 hours early. So I had a little TV with the rabbit ears. I turned the TV on, I'm sitting there, and then I think, you know what happened? I lean over on my bed a little bit, and before you know it, I'm waking up at 7:40 and my heart is beating and I'm sweating. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to miss them. So I call to the gym. I say, hey, it's Arcieri. Has the bus left yet? And to this day, I still have a beef with the guy, the old gentleman in the equipment room, because he's like, oh yeah, they're on the Mass Turnpike now for 10 minutes. And I later found out that they were still in the parking lot waiting for me. And I lived on the other end of campus. It would have taken me a good 10 minutes to sprint it. Anyway, so I didn't bother to sprint to the gym. I sprinted to the phone again and called my dad. And it's now, it's 10 to 8. My dad's in Ridgewood, New Jersey, 2 hours away. And so I said, hey, I missed the bus. I know you can't believe this, but I missed the bus and I got to get to Hamilton College. Can you take me? And he did. I think all he said was, be outside your dorm in 2 hours, whatever it was. He comes, he gets me. We get up to Hamilton, and we get to Hamilton College. This is before GPSs, by the way. This is 1982. So I'm sitting there with a map, and we get there probably like the team was still settling into the room. So I'm feeling kind of good about that, although I've already committed the mortal sin when I missed the bus. And so guys are looking at, and the seniors are looking like, dude, really? You're a freshman? You missed the bus. And so coach walks in and he sees me, doesn't say anything. And I'm just kind of like put my head down, and there were bunk beds. It's like a dormitory. So I walk out, and a couple of minutes later, we happen to be in the same space by ourselves. Coach, he says, yes, not one of the best ways for you to start your career here at Wesleyan, huh? And so I said, no, coach, not at all. I apologize. And so he said, all right, don't worry about it. He didn't play me in the first game, and then he played me in the second. And I think we lost the first game. But, my dad stayed at a local hotel, and then he drove back by himself. Now, he would have driven to Hamilton by himself anyway. So, but yeah, man, but here we are. I'm 56, right? And I look back on my life, and I don't really think too much about missing the bus. What I think about is my dad, and for him, it wasn't even a thought process. All it was okay, just be ready, right? And so I'm blessed. I have a dad and mom who do that, so other people don't have that. But yeah, that was as Clyde Frazier would say, I was inauspicious to begin my career, and it's just so it's ironic to me. Like I have faults, and there are things that I'm guilty of, and being late or missing a bus is just not one of them, right? If you ask all my friends, okay, what would Michael do or not do? Nah, man, Mike's never going to be late. And the notion that I missed was too funny. But anyway, but thank you for bringing it up. I appreciate it. The listeners at home now know I got off on a squeaky start with Herb Kenny and Wesleyan basketball, but it ended okay.
It ended more than okay. And that's, I think, what the big thing is, that, right, you learn from it, and there was a turnaround from that point on, where it's okay. I'm normally the guy that's never late, but now I'm never ever like it just kind of maybe flipped. That's made that even more of a priority for you, and you've been living that ever since to this day. But maybe thinking more. I mean, you mentioned how most people maybe talk about the actual basketball career that you had afterwards. I mean, what I wanted to ask you about was the legal stuff that you did, because that's what you maybe did right after school. What I find interesting is that the passion was in basketball, but you went right into law and going to Italy right after school. So how did that all play out, and how did that maybe shape the rest of your life after graduating from Wesleyan?
So I mentioned my mom is from Italy, right? My dad's Italian, but from New York City, and then he went to school. And so I was able to get, anyway, so I knew I could always get double citizenship, because my mother, I was born in 1964, but she was living in the States, but she was still an Italian citizen. She didn't become naturalized in 1960. So I always knew I could get an Italian passport of citizenship. So even when I was at Wesleyan, by my senior year, I was talking to my coach about helping me play in Italy, because I thought that with the citizenship, I might have a chance to do that. So anyway, I graduated in 86, and I'd thought about the law and law school a little bit, but to keep it extremely 100 here, I was just thinking about playing basketball, right? So when I was a senior at West, so I got an excellent education, and I And if I never saw basketball again, I think I'd have opportunities to do some things. But I was trying to play ball. But I didn't have anything hooked up or tryouts or anything. So I graduated, I think, on June 1st in 1986 from Wesleyan. And I started as a paralegal at a law firm in the second tower at the World Trade Center. And I was in the real estate department. And so I was a paralegal, and I was doing a lot of document review and, kind of the grunt work and kind of the work that paralegals do. It was an excellent firm, and I got to be exposed to a lot of great thinkers and professionals, and that was a good thing. But the basketball was it was still in there, man. So I went to England in 1987, so a year later, and tried out with a couple of teams. Nothing came of it, came back. I kept my job, and then I ended up somehow getting an agent based in Lugano in Switzerland. I went ahead and got my citizenship in 1988. Again, this is a long shot. I don't want to bore the listeners nor you. In 88 was when Italy was finally going to change the rule to allow a dual citizen to play in the Italian leagues as an Italian. Up until then, I wasn't a person in my situation was not allowed to, but the other countries you could. So in France and Greece, if you had dual citizenship, you wouldn't count against the two Americans that were playing. You could just be a Frenchman, Greece or whatever, Greek or whatever it was. So finally, the news came out in the fall of '88 that, hey, the Italian Federation is going to change this rule finally. And so there were a couple of people like me, like Danny Calandrillo was a great player at Seton Hall a couple of years before me, who also was able to, I remember hearing that he'd also gotten his passport and was trying out. So I ended up getting my passport, and the beautiful thing was I ended up trying out and signing a deal to play for this team in Bologna, which is the city where my mom is from, where my dad went to medical school, where my mother's family all still lived, and they even owned and ran a cafe right in the center of town, like a few blocks away from the Paladozza, which is the arena where this team Fortitudo played. So I went there for, I think it was 3 weeks, and I played a bunch of friendlies. They liked me. They signed me this thing. But the contract was conditional. It was for the following season. Right? The contract was, we know the Federation is going to change this rule. You'll be eligible to play. So we're signing you to this contract to play for us for these 3 seasons. And so that was December. It was my mom's birthday. December 1st, 1988 is when I signed the contract. I went home to the States. I left my paralegal job, started training, working out, swimming, playing. And then in April of '89, the same agent from Lugano, Stefano, calls me and says, hey, man, I got some terrible news. He said, the Italian Players Federation has told the Basketball Federation that if they change that rule to basically allow a guy like me that the Italian players saw as a foreigner, like they saw me as an American, it didn't matter, I had his passport, if they were going to strike and not play in the 89-90 season. So P.S., long story short, the Federation did not change the rule. And then that rule changed because of some litigation that happened with a Dutch soccer player, I think in 1992. They call it the Bozeman rule, which I think he was a soccer player similar to me. He was not able to play in a different country. He brought a lawsuit under the theory that the European Union is a union. I'm a citizen of this union. Why do I have to be? I don't know if he was trying to play in Germany or France. I don't know the specifics, but I know the name Bozeman, and it became very famous for the open movement of players throughout the European Union to go play in countries, but as a countryman, as a citizen, if you will. Anyway, so man, long and boring story, but it was one of those things in life, right? It was a tremendous high. Like, man, I'm going to go play in Italy. And I know you're too young to know these names, brother, but Artis Gilmore and Gene Banks were playing on this team that I was playing with in Italy. And so they may have been playing on the team again the following year. I was going to be playing down the street with my family. My dad ran drug research for a subsidiary of Bayer, which is a German pharmaceutical company. So he had business in Europe often, and he was in Europe once a month. So he would, my dad, he would have come to games. So I was 24. So it was really, it was a high. But that's life, right? Sometimes, you get dealt a great hand, and then you get a call from somebody that says, hey, you know what, I got bad news. But that's okay. That's part of the journey, and why we're sitting here today, and probably where I've been and what I've done is right, related to me not having spent that time in Italy and playing there. Who knows what would have happened. But so that was 89. So then 90, I went back to Italy for a little bit because I was going to try to, there was talk of changing the rule again. And then I was going to, if I couldn't play, I interviewed with Mike D'Antoni, who was coaching the team in Milano at the time, to see about maybe working on his coaching staff as well. I came back in 1990, and then I ended up, by luck, just getting a coaching job at Northern Valley Regional Old Japan. Because my JV coach at Bergen Catholic, when I was a varsity player, he was a JV coach, John Fiocchi. He was looking for an assistant coach for the varsity team. I happened to find that out, and so I ended up coaching for 2 seasons with him, coaching the JV and then assisting him with the varsity. Absolutely loved that experience. As we talked about, coaching is one of the most beautiful things you can do. And then, and I don't know if you want to, I'll let you ask the question. I don't want to just keep talking, but that would then lead into my time with the Nets, and then leaving the Nets and the community and all those things. But let me take a breather here, let you do some talking and not put our audience to sleep.
Definitely. I mean, one thing I did look it up. They actually call it Bozeman A or Bozeman B contract. It's named after the Belgium soccer. He's a soccer player from Belgium, and they that lawsuit changed the entire landscape of European sports. That's something that I, as a pretty big basketball fan, a pretty big international sports fan, has no idea about. So it's interesting, right, that you bring that up and add some context to that entire situation that maybe would have impacted so many players like you. But the one thing I want to take away from that, especially, is that you're living life with no regrets, and like you see that what would have happened if that happened. So many things change for you. And like you maybe have mentioned, that also opens up to your, after you were coaching at the high school level, your job with the Nets. And I'm curious, right, getting into scouting, was it something that you had a feeling you'd wanted to do, or was it something that once you did it, right, going into your job with the Nets? I mean, you started off in ticket sales, which is a route that a lot of people go through, but right, it might be in many times so hard to get to the next level. What was it like for you going into ticket sales, knowing that your aspirations were to continue on that basketball journey?
Yeah, so when I was coaching at the high school ball, and then, right, so the basketball was always the passion, and really I wanted to keep playing right after Wesleyan and see how long and where I could go and play. And certainly, obviously, Italy was like part of that plan. And then, by the time that I kind of come back from Italy that second time, and nothing worked out either with D'Antoni and the team with the coaching, I think subliminally, at least, if not consciously, at that point now I'm 25, and I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe the playing career might be coming to an end. And so what's next? And certainly the coaching I loved, but I don't recall thinking to myself, oh, you know what, I want to keep coaching high school for a bunch of years and be a long time, or go to college, whatever. I remember it was a friend of mine, her name is Billy Streets. Her name is Theodosia, but her mom loved Billie Holiday, so she called her Billy. But she had been working at the Nets. And I even at that time, I remember, again, basketball being the passion, having some notion that working in professional basketball was something that I wanted to do, without knowing whether, okay, do I want it to be management? Do I want it to be coaching? But so when she called me to say, hey, look, because it wasn't even a formal internship. They were literally looking for a couple of people to sit in the Nets locker room and cold call people to sell tickets. So even calling it an internship, I think, is glorifying it too much. But she had worked there, and she was very friendly with the Jimmy Lamparello was the senior vice president of sales. And so Jimmy had let her know they were looking for a couple of people. She tells me, the coaching season had ended. It was like March or April, and I wasn't really doing anything. So she calls me one morning and says, hey man, get out of bed. I got something for you. And so, with perfect candor, right, I didn't want to be a salesperson for an NBA team or anything really, but nothing against selling, by the way. But just personally, I thought, okay, well, let me at least get inside the house and see if I can figure out a way to find a way. And so I want to keep the story short, but I ended up having a lot of success selling tickets because I was playing basketball my whole life, right? So I had a bunch of friends who liked basketball. So in June and July, I was selling $15,000 worth of tickets in a week when the full-time salespeople were selling 300. again, it was just fluke luck because it was my first time and I just happened to have these friends. But unbeknownst to me, because I was down in the Nets locker room, Kenny Anderson, Derek Coleman, Chris Morris, Moogie Blaylock, that team, I was sitting there at a table. And there was one other girl, Mary Beth maybe, and one other guy. So the three of us were just cold calling people. And so but we even entered in a different door. So the people who worked there permanently didn't even see us. They didn't even know we were there. But then I learned later that the sales report would come out every week. And so my name's at the top. They're like, Michael Arcieri, $13,000. The next guy had like $400. And he was the full-time, right, which was almost, but again, I've explained why it happened. But this happens like a couple of 3 weeks. And so finally, this Jimmy Lamparello gentleman says, hey, you're doing a good job. Why don't we give you a full-time job and you can come actually be up here and get a cubicle and a real phone and be part of the group and not be down there in the locker room. And so I just said to him, I said, Jimmy, I appreciate that. But I want to be candid. I didn't come here because I wanted to work in sales. I wanted to work in basketball operations. I'll make it. I'm not a deal maker per se, by the way, John, but these things sort of come to you like necessity is the mother of invention, right? So I just said, look, Jimmy, and I knew that Jimmy was very friendly with Willis Reed. And Willis at the time was the GM of the Nets. So I said, look, if you get me in his office for a conversation, because I want to try to work him back, I told him why. If I can't make it happen, then I'll stay with you and I'll come work in sales. And he was a good man. I mean, is a good guy. He said, sure, man, I got you. And you heard it already on the podcast, but it was a Friday. And Willis is sitting there, had a big mahogany, beautiful brown mahogany desk, and a big black leather chair. And there's Willis, 6'9" and grayish hair and huge hands. But mountain of a guy, but at the same time, a really gentle, salt of the earth human being. Hopefully you'll meet him one day if you haven't already. And so I sit down in this chair in front of his desk, and Jimmy's sitting to my right. And so Willis is sitting there, and and Willis and I just chatted like once or twice. So he knew who I was, but we were strangers. So, hey, Michael, Jimmy says that you wanted to have a conversation. He tells me you're doing a great job with the sales. And so he said, what's on your mind? And so I said, well, Willis, I've enjoyed doing the sales, but really I have a basketball background, a passion for the game, and I would love to help you all in basketball operations is something that's a dream goal of mine. So I'd love to join your group somehow. So it was like 30 seconds. It was quick. And so he kind of leans back in his chair and he says, hey, I said, well, I appreciate you coming in here and asking. He says, and then he puts his head down. He says, and kind of that doesn't feel it. Right? I don't like where this is going. It's a hard business and there's not a lot of stability in it. You don't make a lot of money. You're on the road a lot. Got to know people. And so I'm having two conversations, right? The one in my own head and then the one I'm having with him. And he says, I've got some contacts. Maybe I can contact some college coaches for you. And so I motioned for a timeout. And I said, could I call a timeout real quick? And he stops. And I said, listen, I appreciate you taking the time to let me come in here. And I'm grateful to Jimmy. And I hear you. I know it's all those things. Obviously, you know what you're talking about. And I would imagine that there isn't a lot of stability in money. And so, but I'm 27 years old and I don't really care about stability. I don't really care about money either. And you mentioned contacts. As far as I'm concerned, I have the two best contacts in the state of New Jersey. I got you and I got him. I said, let me go scout a game for you. If you like what I do, you let me scout a second. If you don't, I'll come back and help Jimmy sell tickets to the team. Again, I like to refer to it as my one moment of coherence in my life. Being able to kind of think on your feet a tiny bit, not that it was any great thinking, because it was obvious where he was going. I'm not going to give you an opportunity. And maybe just what our parents teach us, it's not what you ask for in life, it's the way you ask for it. Maybe that appealed to him, but he just kind of smiled. I kind of, in my peripheral, I could see Jimmy kind of half smiling. And he just said, go outside and see. To this day, I still blank on her name. Her name was her. His executive assistant was Patty or Pam. I think it was Patty. But anyway, go out and see Patty and go get a credential for it was the Big East ACC Challenge, and it was happening in Hartford. I said it before Providence, but it wasn't Providence. It was Hartford, because then Willis and I went to Providence 2 weeks later. Anyway, so I went up there. I sat next to Danny Manning's dad, who was scouting for San Antonio at the time, coincidentally. And it was, I remember the teams: UConn, Wake, Pitt, and Maryland. And, back in the day, man, this is 1991, right? This is an index card, writing down information about players, and wrote my reports, went to the office the next Monday, walked into Willis's office, handed him the index cards. He took them, he read them for a little while. He reached into his drawer, he pulled out the calendar for the 91-92 college season, flipped it to me across the desk and said, "Go scout all the games you want to." Anyway, so that was just, right, it all came together because he was a nice guy. I'm not special, I didn't do anything. He just, like, the thing that I did was I was able to get into the building, right? The thing that I did, I was able to just coincidentally sell enough tickets to have Jimmy Lamparello notice me enough to have him offer me a position so I could say, hey. And so you've got to make your own way and make your luck, which I think I did. But none of that happens without the kindness of Jimmy Lamparello, right, and Willis Reed. And so that turned into a couple of seasons scouting with the team. And then I don't know if you want to jump into the community center stuff yet, but I'll stop talking for a minute. But I was doing all East Coast stuff. I wasn't going probably south of Maryland, but I would. And my first year with the Nets was my second year coaching the team. So I was coaching during the week, usually Monday through Friday, and then I would go see 2 college games for the Nets, like on Saturday and Sunday. Maybe I could get 2 games on a Saturday. I'd get an afternoon game and get a night game, and then get a game on Sunday. Although back then it was mostly Saturday games. So that was East Region. Then Willis had me doing a bunch of international stuff also the second season, which was great too. I was in your home country. I was in Athens to go see PJ Brown. We had drafted him a year prior, and he was playing for How do you say it? Panathinaikos.
Panathinaikos.
Say Panathinaikos. And so I was. Matter of fact, I was there. It was New Year. It was the week after Christmas. So I was in some restaurant on New Year's Eve in Athens. Anyway, so that was some international stuff as well in the 92-93 season. Yeah.
The one there's so much to unpack there, and obviously, right, you climbing the ranks and doing such a good job in ticket sales to where you end up scouting is incredible and something that you never hear about happening. But what I cannot get over for the life of me is how you had the courage to give Willis Reed, the man that won the Knicks 2 championships and walked out in Game 7, a timeout. How did that? How?
I think you're being kind and using the word courage. I'd like to think I have a little bit of courage someplace in me, but that was probably more stupidity or just not knowing my place or just not knowing what was the smarter, more appropriate way to kind of divert him from the path he was going down, which is, hey, let me call a couple of college coaches for you. Now you got to go so I can run this team. Anyway, so that was just what I happened to think of. But I appreciate you coloring it with the word courage. I'll take it. I'll take that one. I don't know. I mean, it's funny us talking about it now, or I've told that story obviously a couple of times, and yeah, it kind of sounds half good. Like, okay, that was a pretty cool thing to do. But in the moment, again, it's like, remember we talked about, man, if your heart's beating fast, you know you're living. Like in the moment, I was just sitting there with my heart going like this, and the only thing I wanted was for this guy to let me go scout a game. So I don't know. It's kind of like the mothers who pick up the car, right, when their baby is underneath. You know, and how do they have the strength to do these things? And it's obviously I'm not equating what I did with that kind of courage, but yeah, but that's funny. That's a funny thing to point out. But thankfully he had the kindness and to do what he did, right? So I always remember that. I've seen him often. I've seen him a number of times since then. And, that guy obviously has a very, very warm spot in my heart. So, yeah, Willis Reed. So, yeah, so everybody knows him, but not everybody knows him in quite the same way. But he's got a heart of gold, man. He's a good man.
That's awesome thinking about all that. And definitely, I do think courage is the appropriate word. But then talking about maybe that season, maybe you scouted a lot of college games and that sort of thing. But afterwards, you scouted some former guests of the show, like George Mirasan and stuff like that. I mean, what did those following years maybe look like for you in traveling the world and scouting all so much great basketball?
Yeah. So it was like you said, I mean, to be paid, right? So Georgie was playing in Paris, right? So Willis says, hey, go over and go see. And so there was PJ in Greece and then go over and see George. And so, right, to go to Paris and spend time with him at his agent, go have some dinners, watch him play. You know, it's hard to even describe the feeling, the fun, right? I mean, I would gladly pay my own money to buy a plane ticket to go to Paris. I would pay my own money to go watch a basketball game instead, to have the blessing of somebody else paying you to do those things. And traveling is one of my great passions, you know, after, right, call it God and family, or, you know, wife, or like the important ones, and then basketball, and then, you know, travel is, you know, right there. So I love the travel. So it's hard to even describe just what a whirlwind, surreal, fun life it was to have that opportunity and to be seeing international basketball, right, which still is, and was, you know, different than the NBA game. And I was youngish, and look, we're always growing as scouts, right? I'd like to think I can evaluate decently. But, you know, today, but even at that time, but still, you're always learning more about players and like, translatability. This thing this guy can do here in France or Greece, can he do this, you know, in the NBA? So it was all a learning experience, and to be able to come back home and to hand Willis. Again, I laugh because at that time, you're handing somebody index cards, and then I've obviously worked for teams after that where they're very elaborate, right, computer programs and scouting, you know, databases and things. So it's kind of funny to juxtapose those two realities. But but it was it's hard to beat it, man. Hard to beat it, and so again, I use the word blessed maybe too often, but I don't know how else to describe somebody paying you to go do something that you love doing and you would otherwise pay a premium to do yourself. So.
That's exactly why I find that so interesting. And it's just exciting, right, just hearing about it and then just imagining, right, traveling and doing all those things just is super exciting for me too, just thinking about it. But then maybe going into, right, as much as you love the game, you had this other thing with this nonprofit starting up right around that time, and stepped away for what you thought would be a year and turned into a lot more than that. But I'm curious maybe what that might have looked like. And if you explain to our listeners, maybe what went into that decision, as hard as it might have been, to step away and pursue that.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to share. The listeners at home, man, they'd be like, man, this guy, remember I told there are two ironies. One is I'm never late, and I end up being late for one of the biggest things. And in real life, I'm quiet and don't talk a lot. But the people listening right now are going to be like, what, dude? What are you talking about? You never shut up. So going back to, and the Georgie Mirasan story is the perfect segue into this, because I'm flying back from Paris. And during that time too, John, I'd have a scouting assignment. Maybe I'd be away for 2 or 3 weeks, and I'd come home. And I'd be home for a couple of 3 weeks. Well, I wasn't just on the road, and then I'd just be scouting games on the weekends. But I had a little bit of free time on those off weeks. And so Holy Name of Jesus, it's a Roman Catholic church on 96th in Amsterdam. That's where I went to. I lived on 97th in Riverside, so I lived 2 blocks away. And that was my church. And so they were looking for volunteers to teach English as a second language to mostly Mexican and South American immigrants. So I was teaching ESL also at that time. So I'd gotten to know the priests who ran, and the main priest, Father Jim Hines, who ran the church. May he rest in peace. He passed away in 2005, I think was the year. Good man. And so he and I had become friends. I got to know him because I was doing this teaching thing. And so I'm get on the plane, going back to JFK, and here's Father Jim sitting on the plane. Now, of course, priests fly also, but you just don't typically see a priest that you know. He's wearing his, dark shirt and his white, collar. And so I see him, he sees, and he knew what I did for a living, so it didn't surprise him. And he says, hey, Father, what are you doing on this plane? And we kind of laughed about it. And so he was on some conference thing, and going to a conference, coming back to New York. And so mid-flight, he comes back to me and he says, hey, I want to tell you about this thing we're doing back home. And he says, you know that building that you're teaching English as second language in now? So it was a pretty 4-story brick built, typical, it's not a brownstone, but it's a 4-story brick building on 97th Street between Broadway and Amsterdam. That's where I was teaching the classes. It had like a multi-purpose room on the first floor, a gymnasium, basketball court on the 3rd floor. The 2nd floor had some offices, and the 4th floor was really an overhang that looked out onto the gym. And I played ball in there, so it wasn't run down, but I would venture to say it probably wasn't, up to all codes. Let's just say that. But Father Jim comes back and he says, hey, and Father Jim was a member of the Franciscans. The Franciscans are a Roman Catholic order of priests who had taken over the staffing of that church back in right at that time in 1990. So Father Jim comes back and says, hey, you know that building that you play ball in once in a while, you're teaching English? He said, we just raised $250,000 to refurbish that place. And what we want to do is and the Franciscans are very much into social service ministry, getting out into their communities and doing things for the people of those communities. He says to me, I want to found and operate a not-for-profit. And Michael, I want you to help me do it. So it wasn't like, hey, we're thinking, now he wasn't putting a gun in my head, but we were pretty friendly. He knew me. He probably knew that I might have some inclination to do a thing like that. And he was a very good recruiter, Father Jim. But anyway, so that's what he asked me. So I get home and I'm literally in my little bathroom in my 2-bedroom apartment. And I'm looking in the mirror like, okay, so what am I going to do? And what I said to you before about the blessing of getting paid to go to Paris to watch basketball. So I said, well, maybe this is a sign that I need to do a little give back thing. And so I'm going to go do this for a year. In my mind, that was the plan. So I went to Willis and said, hey, this thing's come up. I'd like to go do this for a year, but I don't want to lose, I don't want to say my place, but we've built something here and I want to work for the Nets, but can I go do this thing, basically? And Willis, of course, being Willis, said, yeah, man, of course, go. That's a nice thing that you're doing. Go do that. And so I left the Nets. As a matter of fact, I always say this because it breaks my heart, but my last official act with the Nets was attending Drazen Petrovic's funeral. He had just passed. That was June of 1993. Yeah. And so that was like almost the last week that I was there. And then I went to work for the Franciscans. And it's a long, it's a long story. I end up being there for 12 years, right? So 1 year, 12 months becomes 12 years. And so let me stop talking for a minute in case there's anything else you want to, I could talk about my time there or that as well, but you asked how that happened. Well, that's how that happened. And then how did 12 years happen was the place just continued to grow. When I started, the budget was my salary. So I'm happy to tell the world I was making $27,000 in 1993. That's the money that he had. Father Jim had in the budget to start doing this thing. And then we got lucky and we met this person who knew this foundation and they funded a counseling program and then an after-school program. And then before you knew it, the big foundations in New York, all who talked to each other, found out about us through one of the people funding us. They came. And so by year 6, our budget was $1 million, right? So obviously we'd grown and it was, it's hard to describe, John, because it was, I had no way of knowing what that road would look like while it was kind of like getting an MBA on the job because I was hiring, firing, and fundraising and running programs and advertising and teaching and mopping up the bathroom and flooding. But I was managing people, right? And at first I was managing 3 people. And then I was managing a full-time staff of 10 and 75 part-time. Before you knew it, I was managing 1,000 people. And I share this with you just to say, for a lot of the years or toward the end of that time, when I really started feeling like, okay, man, the NBA is where I want to be. Am I missing out or is this wasted time or does this not translate, right? If you're a scout, hey, does this translate? But that just goes to show how ignorant I am, right? Because in fact, that 12 years at this community center, I was basically the GM of the Franciscan Community Center. Right? So you name it, you're managing people daily, you're managing programs, you're recruiting, you're getting the money, you're hiring, you're firing, you're negotiating. I mean, so when I finally got to Orlando and had the job description that I had and all the things that I was, so many of the skills that I was falling back on or utilizing were very much skills that I honed, dare I say, at the community center, because some of these things they're universal. Right? How do you lead people? How do you invest in people? How do you care about them? How do you inspire them to want to go beyond themselves and be the best employees they can be? And you can't read that in a book, right? You have to live that or learn that. And so again, I talked a little bit about God. I happen to be Catholic and believe, and I'm not saying anything is predestined for me, but in terms of my path, then getting to the NBA and having the jobs that I've had, the job descriptions, it makes perfect sense that I left being a scout, because I've done the scouting, right? A scout, you're at home. Like I've worked for NBA teams now, and our remote scouts, they live in Cincinnati or Florida or LA, and they work from home, and they come into the town for a couple of weeks for your season meetings at the beginning of the year or in January and for the draft. But to be able to manage human beings and lead an organization, that and it happens to be stuff that I really love and place a premium on. But my time at the community center, I had no idea just how valuable it was. But everybody learns that life lesson, right? You're learning it, right? Right now, in 10 years from today, you and I will be talking, and you'll be talking about just how valuable the Gen Z podcast was, or coaching the high school team at Xavier was, or that sports management degree you got at X school. Because right now you're living it. And I think right now you can even perceive, okay, yeah, man, this is good for me. I'm developing this skill, communication and analysis, and I'm networking and I'm developing rapport. But you won't even really be able to connect the dots until, anyway, so for me, it was fun because I'm not going to lie, man, for a lot of I was there 12 years. And now the last 4 years I was going to law school specifically to work for an NBA team, right? Like who does that? But that was just my thing. And we can get into that later. But to be at that place all that time, for a lot of that time, I didn't know how the dots connected or if they did. And man, have I just wasted all in terms of getting to work for an NBA team? I don't mean the work that I was doing. I'll look back, on my deathbed, I'll look back at that 12 years and probably be like, that was the most important thing I ever did. I could go on to win a title with some NBA team and probably, okay, well, but still, that was more important what happened in New York City, that 12 years in terms of, anyway. But now I'm just on a soapbox, so I'll shut up. And you can ask some questions.
No, it's incredible thinking about how you could apply something that maybe on the surface level has nothing to do with basketball to basketball. That's what I love. And while I try to surround myself with basketball all day long, I do love always trying to find in my own life, maybe our listeners can think of the way they can do it too. Okay, maybe what I'm doing right now isn't involved with basketball, but how can I make it involved?
Yep. I'm sorry. Yeah, there's one important piece that I left out. I don't know why because I always know it so obviously, but in telling the story, the one piece that I left out that is also relevant here for the basketball audience. So is that I mentioned there was a gymnasium on the 3rd floor, right? So I had my office built in the back part of the 3rd floor and a plexiglass window put next to my desk so I could see into the gym. And then I remember Mario Ellie, who played for the Houston Rockets. You may not, Mario, a little while ago, but Mario and his family lived in the neighborhood. Mario's cousin, Jerry Erasmi, he and I lived together for a few years. Jerry worked at Nike. Mario ended up contributing a nice amount of money to help us put padding on the gym walls. And it wasn't 94 by 50. It was like 72 by 36. I had to, we had the wood redone. But the part that I always leave out is that I was basically coaching an AAU team. I was doing individual instruction, and we had kids from really 10 years of age to 25. So Zane Massey didn't grow up at the community center, but he kind of sort of did. And he was playing. And so we had legit CHSAA basketball players coming into the gym. God Shamgar with Dallas right now. God played in that. So I shared that two things. One, I was able to stay super close to basketball because I was coaching, instruction, individual running practices, running open gyms kind of thing. So I shared that to say that I was able to feed that. The passion thing was still, it kind of made, like my friends would come like, it makes sense you work here. And you're doing this thing for the community, but you got this whole basketball piece here, which makes perfect sense. And then the other piece was, of course, it just, communicating with, working with basketball players, specifically guys who are age 17 to 25, right, is very helpful for me because then I get to the NBA and of course I'm working with and talking to that same category of players age and such. And so even that's a more obvious thing that I should have understood. Well, yeah, obviously this thing is helping me in terms of my basketball growth, but I just wanted to mention that because it's part of the picture.
So key. And before I say anything else, I have to shout out Mr. Zane Massey from Xavier High School, because that's obviously how we met each other. Him obviously having gone to the community center as a kid, bringing you into Xavier High School for our camps later on. But I know he's listening. So Mr. Massey, thank you so much for putting this together and putting me in touch with Michael. This has obviously been an incredible show. And we still have some more to go through, but it's been great so far.
I'm gonna out Zane Massey because I love him to death and I'm super proud of him and what he's gone on to do and to have the role that he has with Xavier and just impacting lives. And there's nothing more important than that. I mean that extremely genuinely. So I got love for him, but I'm deeply proud of him. And now I'll share the joke is, and I don't know if you've ever played basketball with Zane. Zane's left-handed, had a nice little game. And he, like a lot of New York City point guards, he had a tendency to try to make the home run play. So I used to call him PTG because prone to greatness and the occasional turnover. Right? So it was all those letters. I cut it short to PTG. And I'd be running a practice, and he'd come down, and he'd like make the extra behind the back dribble that he didn't need and turn it over. And I'm a soft-spoken guy, but when I like you, most people, but when I'm coaching and in between the lines, then what you believe about how the game should be played comes out, right? And I blow the whistle. Hey man, seriously, right? We had a layup, but you had to go between your legs, right? And now we have a turnover, 4-point swing. Just wanted to say that. And he just, but some guys wouldn't take that very well. They curse at me. But Zane would be like, no, you're right, coach. And then the next time he'd come down and make a two-hand, like very fundamental bounce pass. But anyway, much love to Zane Massey for putting us together. And I enjoyed being at Xavier that day too. That was fun being with kids.
Definitely a lot of fun and right, just continuing the work of you, right, giving back to the youth and the community. But right, I think the biggest takeaway from that obviously is right how you were able to learn skills that would help with basketball, even though you weren't maybe exactly doing basketball 100% of the time. And I find that so cool. I'm thinking about that. I mean, once those 12 years, at the end of those 12 years, what kind of led you to go back into the NBA and continue with the work you did previously?
Sure. So I around year 6. So around 1999 or so was when I was working all the Knicks camps. I was staying connected to the game by the stuff I was doing in the building. I was a camp counselor at the Knicks camps all those years and of course loved doing that. But around 1999 is when I got to the point where I said, okay, I love what this place does, but this isn't my life calling. I want to get back to basketball. Well, how am I going to do that now? Okay. Yeah. All right. I scouted for 2 years in the NBA and that certainly doesn't hurt my resume. It doesn't hurt my cause, but I didn't really think it was going to get the deal done just because. And again, you're way too young to remember any of this. Maybe you've done the research or study, but in the 90s, there were a couple of lockouts in the NBA and the CBAs being renegotiated and the terms like the salary cap, the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, minimum salary, and all these things. So what's happening in the NBA at that time, at least I think I was correct in my read of it, was that you had general managers and assistant GMs, and mostly guys who were running teams, who hadn't had to live with those things right up, and like that was all new. So they didn't know the trade rules, so they were outsourcing work to attorneys or accountants to figure out hey, can I do this trade? Hey, well, what does this mean? Am I going to go over the cap? Oh, I could use this. So basically what I thought was, okay, my resume is decent. I played a little, I coached a little, I scouted a little. I think I have a good sense of the game and players, but does it make me stand out? Or, oh man, I got to hire Michael because he's going to be the best. No. But I thought, you know what? And I kind of had thought about law school and had a general, and I said, let me kind of up my game a little. Let me work on my craft, if you will. Meaning, let me go to law school. Let me try to study collective bargaining, negotiating, agency, contracts, representation, whatever it might be. Learn how to communicate better, analyze better. Go do that, and then based on what I thought might be the trajectory running NBA teams, that skill set all put together might be valuable. And so in 1999, I decided to go to law school, and I decided to go to law school at night so that I could keep working. And there were two reasons for that. One, because we built a really nice thing at the Franciscan Community Center. And unfortunately, I was the executive director. There were 8 full-time people. We had about 75, 80 part-time, and we had hundreds of volunteers. But the foundations and all the people who gave us all the money, for the most part, they really knew me the best. They would come and visit a class and they'd meet teachers, but I was the person presenting. So the concern, of course, was, and look, I'm not special. Like, the point is, I should be able to leave and the place should just continue doing the great work that it does, irrespective of me being here or not. But my concern was that that's just not the way it was. Everybody at the foundations, they knew me. And the Franciscan priests also, because it was founded under their auspices, if you will, at Holy Name. Anyway, so I thought, so I wanted to use the time. I knew it'd be 4 years instead of 3. But I thought, I can give the community center in this community 4 more years. I can tell the board of directors right now, I can give them a 4-year succession plan window. Say, hey, I'm leaving on January 1, 2005. I'm going to leave. But you got 4.5 years to figure it out who's going to replace me or how you want to do this. And the other part of it, very candidly, was I was making more than $27,000, not a ton more. By going to school at night and working, I could pay for law school. And I knew I wanted to have the flexibility to go chase my MBA thing. So I didn't want to have some student debt that I had to go get a job when I graduated law school in June 2004. So I went to Brooklyn Law School, and it was a grind, man. I mean, because I was going to get to work at 8, work till 5, jump on the 2 train, go down to Borough Hall, go to class from 6 until 9:50. That's 5:00. Get on the subway, come back home by 10:45, and do it all again. So there were no classes on Friday. So Friday was like my vacation day because I only worked right on Fridays. Then on the weekends, you had to read cases. You had to be prepared for next week classes. So that was an interesting time in my life. But again, man, anything you want in life, you got to work hard for. So I survived it and did decently at Brooklyn Law. And knock on wood, if there's wood in this room, I passed the New York and New Jersey bar exam. I took it in July of 2004. And then I did exactly as I said. I left the community center on December 31st, 2004, and then started on another odyssey, which was trying to now get an NBA job. But to answer you also, I started reaching out to NBA teams in April of 2004. So before I finished law school and before I started studying for the bar exam, which I started studying in May of 2004, I started reaching out to NBA teams at that time, right, in anticipation of trying to get hired at some point in 2005. And so that brings us to January 1, 2005. And the Orlando Magic hired me August 13th, 2012. So there's 7 years in between there. But again, I'll stop talking and let you ask the questions now.
There's, I mean, no, I love it, right? And you never have to stop me because you never have to stop yourself because I want to hear what you have to say, and you have some really good stuff to talk about. But I mean, right, there are those years afterwards with the Magic and right, doing all these cool scouting things. My question really isn't so much pertaining to a team. It's more so, I mean, what kind of events were you going to as a scout, right? All these summer league, Portsmouth, all these different events that you're going to watch these players, and furthermore, maybe what advice you would give to someone that's a young scout into going to these events and taking a lot from them.
Absolutely. It's a great question. And nobody at home will believe this, but I don't like talking about myself. But I do like talking about this part of the story because I believe this is the valuable part of the story for the people listening. I got an NBA job, who cares? But for the people who are listening because they want to work in the NBA, right, this is the good part. I mean, to the extent that I have some advice to give, which I do, because I've now lived on both sides of the conversation, if you will. I was a guy trying to get an NBA job for 91 months, right? And now I'm back. Now I'm trying to get an NBA job right now, right? And then I worked for, then I was working for 9 straight seasons. So I kind of know both sides or have familiarity with it. So to answer the first part of your question, so I started working for, in 2005, calendar year, I did not work. I used a little bit of money that I had saved, and I just started to try to re-immerse myself in networking and the NBA. So I went to all the things you said. If there was a place where NBA personnel were, I was trying to be there. So right, Portsmouth, Orlando Summer League, Vegas. I went to the first Vegas Summer League in 2005. I've been to every single one. In 2005, there were like 200 people and 6 teams. Lauren Legary, man, and kudos to him. And look what they built. Right now, it's the whole basketball world is there. But I went to the D League showcase in Boise, in South Padre Island. I had some, I'm decent at networking, so I could get a credential for the Chicago Combine. Right, or when teams were doing the 44-player workouts, sometimes teams get together and sponsor multiple during the draft season. So, and I'd go to a lot of NBA games and college games. And so, yeah, I didn't take any vacations in those intervening 7 years. I mean, vacation was, okay, I'm going to Vegas. I'm going to Portsmouth. And that's just what you had. I felt that's just what you had to do. But again, it took me, right, I said it, 91 months. It took me 7.5 years to get a job. And this may sound immodest, but I felt like I was even halfway qualified. I mean, I scouted before, I had a decent little resume and thought I could help. But again, NBA jobs aren't growing on trees and nobody owes you a job and they're hard to find. So in terms of advice, I'm going to jump right to advice because that's what your listeners really want to hear about. I would say that there were 2 things that I think I was very successful at. And I think you need to be successful at to make the job thing happen. The one is thick skin. The one is to be able to be told no because you're going to be told no. And it's a roller coaster. You're going to talk to a team and all this. And I had some near misses, meaning I had interviews in those 7 years, legitimate ones where I thought I was going to get hired. And then they ended up in all cases promoting somebody from within. But anyway, that's not relevant. But so thick skin and being able to continuously move forward so that when one team says no, okay, that's okay. But it's good that I spoke to them. It's good that that guy at least knows my name. I'm sure I'm going to see him at Portsmouth next year. Now I know I can go say hello to him. He may be standing next to the GM or the director of player personnel for X other team, right? So so I never got too caught up in, oh man, it didn't work out. No, it's not going to. That's why it's hard. It's hard because it doesn't work out until it does, and then it's jubilation. If it's easy, everybody gets NBA jobs, and we're not talking about this right now because you can just walk outside and buy one if you want to. So the thick skin, and what gave me some comfort also was knowing I'm not trying to work for 30 teams, right? I'm not trying to get 30 jobs. I just got to get one. And that sounds super obvious, but it's not so. At least it wasn't, because when one team says no, you feel like, oh man, the air is coming out of my sail. No, the opposite. You've put some air into your sail. You've sailed your boat a bit more forward because you've at least spoken to that person. And maybe he liked you, even if he didn't hire you. Just like I've liked some guys that have, since I got with teams, so working with teams again, guys who reached out to me, and I just didn't have a job. It was January, like the team wasn't hiring, but I hung up the phone or the email. I thought, you know what? I like the way that kid handles himself. You know, if I'm going to make sure I get a coffee with him at Portsmouth, just because I remember the grind. I remember the 91 months. It's not easy. It's a hard thing. And especially my personality is I hate asking for stuff. I hate it. I'm the oldest of 6. I'm used to doing stuff for my siblings. I ran a community center for 12 years. All we did was do things for other people. The only thing I asked for was money. And that was from foundations to give it to us to do programs for people. So asking for stuff for me is hard. So it's a tough grind. So I would say you've got to be prepared for it, right? So have the thick skin, but know that even every no is still got some, there's a silver lining to that no, is that person may have been impressed by you or liked the scouting project that you gave to him. And that leads me into my second point, which I think is the most, they're equally important. The second point is for every 100 emails or calls that I get from people, and this is just not me, everybody who works in the NBA, everybody gets these calls, and it doesn't matter, from GM, assistant GM, to equipment manager, they're all getting them, right? Because everybody wants to work in the NBA. Out of 100, 98 of them read or sound something like this. Oh man, I have great passion for the game. I love the game. You keep hearing the first person singular pronoun, I know I could help you guys. I know him, and I know you're a ball boy. And man, I would love to, I would love to talk to you. And I'm not being super critical of that. That's human nature, right? We want what we want. But 1 or 2 people will send me an email, or other guys in the NBA, and they'll say, I'll use an example. I'm not going to name the player. Hey, Michael, I know you guys are thinking about signing John Doe to an extension this summer, potentially. Here's some ideas I had about that, free of charge, would love your feedback sometime when things slow down, later this summer. And then here was this nicely done little, whether it was analytics based or market comparables based, whatever. But it was just, it could have been wrong. He could have been suggesting we give him too many years, too much money, whatever it was, didn't even matter to me. And because the question becomes, okay, am I going to read it? The answer is absolutely. If I'm spending my life and my time thinking about how much to pay John Doe, and there's an article on ESPN, or you do a podcast talking about it, or some young person sends me, hey, here's an analysis I did about paying John Doe. Of course, I'd be an idiot to not look at it. Now, if there are a zillion people, there's got to be some moderation in some, but the point is that person got away from what he wanted. He stopped using I, and what I can do. Because candidly, what can a 21-year-old really do for an NBA team? I'm not saying there aren't 21-year-olds who could do a lot. Sure, there are. But I'm saying, generally speaking, if you're a 21-year-old, your approach should not be, look at me and what I can. No, it should be, man, I've got a passion and I'm going to work really hard and I'm open to learning and doing whatever it takes. And showing humility and showing you want to be a part of it. But anyway, so my point is, but the 1 or 2 people who send that email and attach an analysis, before I even read the analysis, I'm already impressed. I'm thinking, wow, okay, this guy or gal is already smart enough to not be focused on, that's what my dad said my whole life to me. He said, son, he said, if you may have heard this one also, 2 things. He said, never lose the opportunity to remain silent. That was one of my dad's favorite ones. I actually am a quiet person. I don't even believe this. The second one was literally, you've always got to battle your human nature to focus on yourself. You got to get away from you, and you got to think about what other people are thinking about and what they care about. And that sounds corny and but no, it's because it's hard to do. 98 out of 100 don't do it. They're just focused on what they want. But the 2 people think, no, okay, what I want is important to me, to my girlfriend, NBA. They just want to win a title. And they're going to hire somebody if they think that person will help them win one somehow. So I'm already impressed that you've thought, oh, hey, this is you've done some research. this is what Michael's thinking about these days, I think. Okay, let me add a little value potentially. But let me at least show him that I'm thinking about him, what that team is doing, instead of me just, I want a job. So it sounds like an obvious thing, but I don't think it is, because I still get all the emails and the calls, and it's still the same percentage, the same percentiles of people who are sending me work product and getting outside of themselves and thinking about trying to help either me or the team I work for. So I'm long-winded, man. But the point is, when you're going to go to Vegas, or you're going to go to Portsmouth or whatever it is, and you want to go talk to that guy at that team, right? And this is what I would do. I would say, hey, I know you're going to be at Vegas in August. I know you guys are dealing with free agency, restricted free agency of so-and-so. Here's some thoughts I had about it. Would love to, catch up with you and talk about it a little bit, at Vegas if you have a minute for coffee. That's how I thought you should approach it. Was, man, I want to be thinking about what you already know I want a job. We're already past that. So you want to show people that you can think about being a team player and thinking about other things. So in terms of the networking piece, I can just tell you, man, everybody's getting a zillion of these solicitations, right? The simple question is, how do you stand out enough to get somebody to respond or to engage? Now, I always respond because I've lived it for 91 months. I remember what it felt like when somebody didn't respond at all. And when somebody, even if the response was, there are no positions, but thanks for reaching out. So I always told myself in the 91 months, this is my personal self-confidence, I'm going to get a job. And when I do, I'm going to remember how this felt, so that when these people now reach out to me, I'm going to get back to every single one of them. And some people you talk to for 5 minutes. Some people it's an email. And some people have become my friends. They're still trying to get an MBA job, but they become my friends just because. So I would say you need to be wedded to it. I remember I was at Portsmouth one time. I just joined Orlando, right? So my 91-month odyssey was over. I finally got a job. And a guy who was an attorney who wanted to talk to me about getting an MBA job sat down next. I agreed to meet with him. He sits down next to me. I'm watching one of the games. And he says the following to me. He says, man, I'm really disappointed. I've really been grinding at this for 6 months now. I really can't believe I haven't gotten a job yet. I don't want to be super critical of him, because for him, 6 months may have been a long grind. But can you imagine how I heard that? 91 months. And this person had never even played basketball, hadn't scouted before. All of that to say that, again, I'm not special at all. I didn't do anything special. The point is, if you want this, like any other hard thing in life, if you want it, you've got to be dedicated to it. You have to be ready to hear no and keep going and turn no's into positives. Okay, I appreciate you getting back to me. I know there are no positions, but I want to wish you guys a great free agency. And hey, I'll be at Summer League, so maybe we can watch a half together. Whatever it is, it's because ultimately, who's going to hire you are going to be people. Assume the competency is there, but that's not going to get you hired most of the time. It's going to be rapport. Do I feel comfortable with you? Do I think we have integrity? Are you a good person? Because we work in the NBA every single day. It's not Monday to Friday. My wife gets mad at me every weekend because every Saturday and Sunday I go to work. Maybe some Sundays I don't go to work because the team's not practicing. But she knew that before she married me. So it's all good. But the point is, you've got to be willing to take the no's. But trust me, that final yes, man, is the greatest high you will ever experience in your life. There's no, people say having a child, might be, that's the greatest high. So I haven't had that one yet, so we'll see. But all that to say, be steadfast, grind, but when you're reaching out and you're networking, don't think about yourself so much. Try to identify, what are they concerned about? What are they thinking about? And is there even a way that maybe I can just share a little work product or a little thing that could even potentially help them? But even if it doesn't, that's okay, because you've already done well by showing them that you're thinking about them. And that's evidence of humility and good judgment and just being in the right place. And that's all you're trying to do in that initial communication with somebody. That's your one shot. right? Everybody gets 100 emails. And so what happens is after the 30th, 50th, and 70th, like I had a guy call me literally the day of the trade deadline. Like that was one of the things I did for the teams I worked for. I was very involved in trade. Gentleman literally called me an hour before the trade deadline. Right? That's not your best career move, right? You should know that somebody like that guy might be busy that day. Say you really got to stay. You've got to be committed to it and be okay with no, because the no's are going to happen. But the yes will happen. I believe it will happen if you keep working at it and doing the right things. I've just seen it happen. It happened for me, but I've seen it happen for other of these people who reached out to me, who are trying to get a job. And then lo and behold, I'll get an email from some guy from Team X. Hey, Michael, I just want to let you know that, and I appreciate you talking to me that, like, there isn't a lot in life that gives me more pleasure. I know that sounds super corny, I know, but it's also actually very true, because I've been that person. I know what it's like to not have the job and want it. And I know what I felt like the night that Rob Hennigan called me and hired me. I remember that feeling. I'll never forget it. And if that other people, if they're feeling that as well, and I help them in some little tiny way by having made a phone call, then that's what you should do.
Definitely, but it's incredible hearing about that journey, and like the arduous journey that is those 91 months, but also the lessons you learned from that and how you're able to take those and take them into the obviously what you're doing now. And thank you for the advice on Summer League and Vegas. Obviously, I know a lot of people have to hear it, but even me especially, after this call, we have to have a long talk about what to do in Vegas. You've obviously been to you're a pro. You're a pro when it comes to that. So I'm going to my first on this show. I have definitely a lot of questions for you on that. But really, it's so important about just how to network properly and be able to provide value in return. It's a two-way street. If you look at it as a one-way street, I always tell people, if you look at it as a one-way street, you're going to lose every single time. It's the people that look at it as the way it should be, as a two-way street, as actually a relationship that's real, and that's not only contingent on a job. It's contingent on we both have a passion for basketball. Like there's so much talking. We've been on this podcast for close to 2 hours now, right? Talking about this love we have for the game. That's what it's all about. It's not just so much about, can you help me get a job? If not, I'm not going to talk like that. That's just not how it works. So thank you for sharing that, because I will have to send this episode. There's a lot of reasons for me to share this episode to people, but that's chief among them is, hey, this is how maybe you should restructure your networking approach, because this is how you're coming off and this is how you can improve. I think that's super valuable. And thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, thinking about after those 91 months were over, right? It took a super long time. It's a story of perseverance, like we spoke about at the beginning, maybe, with both of us having that passion and chasing it. Once you, at the end of the pursuit, right, you get the job with Orlando, you get the call, and now you're there. I mean, what do those next few years look like for you, and continuing what you had, right where you left off back in the early 90s?
Yeah, no, happy to share. So, yeah, the 91 months. Who counts the number of months, right? Only somebody as silly as me. But yeah, Rob Hennigan. Gotten to know Rob about a year and a half prior to that. And here you go. I'm going to give you an example of the networking thing and how it worked for me. Exactly the thing I was talking about in terms of trying to offer something. And I'm going to name two people, and that's fine. We can keep them in the recording. It's fine. So I knew Sam Presti a tiny bit just from having met him a few times, but didn't know him great. And in 2011, the Nets and I think the Rockets, they co-sponsored a pre-draft workout. So sometimes two teams can get together and bring a maximum of 44 players for a pre-draft workout, and all the teams can come and attend and evaluate. So I was there, and I was talking to another friend who worked for another team. And we're having a Starbucks coffee. And my friend says to me, so I want to make sure I'm not going to name this friend, but my friend says, hey, you know what? And my friend knew me for a lot of years, knew I was trying to get back in the league. So he said, Oklahoma City, they do it. They spend a lot of time, like a lot of NBA teams do now, but maybe OKC even more so back in 2011. They spend a lot of time really trying to dig and do their research and learn about draft prospects. Obviously not on the court, but off the court. And that's a super important piece of what we do in the NBA in terms of draft selection. So he said, you should reach out to them and let them know, hey, you're here in the Northeast in the New York City area. And they're in Oklahoma City, maybe. And I thought it was a nice idea. And so sure enough, I'm sure that night I sent Sam an email and just said, hey, I just want to let you know, first of all, how you doing? Hope you had a good workout today in New Jersey. And just want to let you know I'm available if you need any help with any of your intel work. I'm here in the New York area, happy to make calls or make a visit if you'd like. And so Sam does not respond to me. But what he does is he has his assistant GM, Rob Hennigan, call me. And Rob calls me the next day. Says, hey, Michael, Sam got your email and asked me to give you a call. And we appreciate your offer. We're good. Of course, everybody's kind of very confidential about those things, which I, of course, was expecting. But the point is that Rob Hennigan and I then spent the next hour and a half on the phone. Just talking life, basketball, whatever it was, and just kind of, hit it off, kind of connected. Just great dude, man. Good, humble, down to earth, smart. All the things you'd want in a friend, right? And we hit it off. And so we stayed in contact every, a couple of months or so. I volunteered to send some scouting reports from that fall, from some college games, just not trying to work for OKC, just trying to give Rob some information, just try to build some rapport with him. And P.S., Rob Hennigan gets hired as the GM of the Orlando Magic in a year later, in June of 2012. And I would tell you that email that I sent to Sam and the call that Rob Hennigan made to me, I know the dots that connect to me getting hired in Orlando. So there you have it, an example of when you're networking, right? If I had just written to Sam, hey, I want a job. I really want a job. I could really help you. I don't know that Rob Hennigan calls me. Maybe he does to say, hey, stop bothering Sam. But anyway, so I just want to drill that one home because I think it's very important. And I will tell you that I would always get a response from guys in the league when I sent those emails because I think they appreciated the work product, the effort, but most importantly, just the right judgment and the right humility, the right place that you are in your head. So, so Rob gets hired, and then I call Rob about 3 days later, something like, hey, I'm sure you knew I was going to call you. And so he says, yeah, look, I'm going to be in Vegas for Summer League. I'll be out there too. I tell him, let's get together and talk. And so then I got out to Vegas, and he was looking for a salary cap. Actually, he was looking for more than that. So anyway, I ended up talking to him for a bunch of hours, and I meet with Scott Perry, who Rob had just hired as the assistant general manager right after he got the job. And I ended up meeting with Scott for a number of hours also. And then they ended up offering me a position on August 3rd at 6:23 p.m. in 2012, in case you didn't think I was counting anything. And so, John, I will just, sometimes in life, man, things work out a whole lot better than you even could have schemed them or dreamed them up. So my job description was I was the in-house counsel, if you will. I was the B-Ops attorney. I was the salary cap guy. I did the contracts. Rob and the staff were deciding what to put in them, right? And sometimes I might have been a part of that discussion too, but then I was literally producing the contracts. I was heavily involved with the trade process, trade calls, coming up with trade scenarios. He asked me to run the budget. So here's an example of a thing that was super important to Rob, that he had somebody that he trusted to run the basketball operations budget, which is not $100, by the way. And so I was managing basically everybody in basketball operations who was spending money at any point in time, which is everybody, right? So I share that simply to say, going back to my time at the community center, is this lost time or does this translate? And here I am now running a budget like I'd done for 12 years. Now, this budget was a lot bigger than the one I had in New York City, but it was the same exact job. It was people who had to follow rules and submit reports and be timely and have meetings and be honest and not misspend. So all the things that I've been doing for a number of, so it was all, I don't want to say it was easy for me, but it was quite natural for me to do. And then I had some scouting responsibilities, not like a full-time scout, but all of that to say that the job description that I had was marvelous, man. I was able to touch a whole lot of the stuff that happened in B-Ops. And Rob put together a great group. I mean, guys I'm still super close to this moment in time, guys I love seeing when I'm on the road. And I would say that was, right, look, we weren't successful, right? We ended up, most of us getting let go in 2017, right, in April or May. And look, right, we understand the business, right? You're there to win basketball games, and if you don't. So that's all totally understandable. What I would say is probably one of my greatest regret, and I regret not being successful, certainly, and not winning and letting the city of Orlando down and the DeVos family. But I think my just as big a regret is that group of guys and girls, we didn't experience any winning, because it was a really wonderful, tight-knit group who cared about each other, made the extra pass, played for each other, So, in my mind's eye, I'd like to think that kind of group deserves to have some success. Now, I don't mean you deserve to win games because your management group gets along great. But those things typically tend to go hand in hand. Right? Typically, I think, in my personal opinion, any group that's managing something that doesn't get along well and doesn't operate well together, typically the thing you're trying to do doesn't go quite so well. But in terms of, so I was doing all sorts of things, and it was great, because I've often had people say, "Hey, take me through a typical day." And that's a hard question for me to answer, because depending on the day, week, or month of the year, my day could be totally different. Right? So if I'm in the trade deadline window of December 1 to February 10, I'm really knee deep in that stuff. If it's May 1 to June 20th, draft night, right, then you're knee deep in synergy or scouting or workouts or combine. And then, of course, I did salary cap stuff. So I was doing a lot of scenarios and projections and trying to help guide the organization in terms of what are our options? Do we have cap space? Should we operate with cap space? Should we just decline to and operate as a team over the cap? So it was, and then just going to Portsmouth and scouting and doing it. So it couldn't have worked out any better in terms of the job description and the group of guys. And then, as I mentioned, we moved on in 2017, and then it ends up being like my life is full of blessings. And then I end up going to work for the New York Knicks, right? I'm a Queens kid. I go work for the team that I've been rooting for my entire existence. And my job description was very much the same. In fact, even touched even more things and got a chance to really be involved with all of the higher level important stuff that front offices do to put a team together. So so if knowing what I know today, would I have waited 91 months? Yeah. Now, I was doing stuff. I was working in a big law firm. So I wasn't twiddling my thumbs at home waiting for a job, but I did other things during that time. But I would say I would say, and this sounds corny, but I mean it. It was worth the wait. And there are times when I look back on that time when I was trying to get the job, and look at it, and it's highs and lows. And there were times when you felt really dejected about it. I'm not going to lie and be like, oh, I know I'm going to get a job every single day. I believed that in the aggregate every day, but there were days where I was like, oh man, I thought I had this one, and then I didn't. And so, you got to draw upon your resources, whatever they are, confidence, faith, God, whatever you want to, that helps you to keep going forward. But yeah, so last 9 seasons where we didn't win as many games as I would have liked to, but in terms of the people I worked with and the job description I had was super versatile, man, super rich, super fun. And so now we're back at it, and we'll see what the future holds. So I'll be out there in Vegas with you, pounding the pavement and looking to uncover an opportunity.
I'm counting down the days to Vegas. I can't wait for it at all. Like it really is for me. This will be my first time, something super exciting. But really, Michael, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, because not just the experience that you've had, but just the way you've been able to apply the skills that you've learned and things don't have to do with basketball to basketball, I find really inspiring. And I know a lot of our listeners will feel the same way. And then obviously, of course, all the advice you gave for something like Summer League is going to be super helpful to me, and then hopefully help other people stay on the right path in terms of chasing their dreams. So thank you so much. I mean, this episode has been so helpful, and there's so many parts of it. I mean, I always keep clips for Instagram. And like the highlights, minute highlights, I might run out of, I don't know how Instagram has a limit to how many you can put up. I'm gonna have a little bit of a problem with that, but we'll figure it out. Well, that's a problem for another day. And I really do want to deeply thank you for coming on the show, because this has been so much fun.
It's my pleasure. And it's been great just getting to know you, and we'll get to know each other better in Vegas. Certainly. I'm looking forward to watching your journey, man, see where you're going to be in 6 months and 6 years. And hopefully we'll be enjoying, this great round ball together as that journey unfolds. And yeah, like I said, man, if I can, I've spoken too much and said too many words, but to the extent anything is helpful to anybody out there, then it's well worth it. I'm happy to look like a guy who talks too much and misses the bus to his first game his freshman year in college.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.